All righty, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for another AO2 webinar. This month we have our partners Prep joining us. So we'll get into some introductions in a minute and then jump into things. But give everybody a minute to drop in here while we're doing that. Little housekeeping. If you've joined these before with us, you've heard me say this before. We love to hear from you in the chat. Feel free to chat with us throughout, especially if you have just, comments to make about poll questions or about things you see. But if you have questions, please make sure you are using the Q&A, which you should see down at the bottom of your screen. That just makes sure that we don't miss any of those. They don't get lost in the scrolling of the chat. So that's the big thing, and we'll try and remind people of that throughout as more people join us during the event. Yeah, thank you for joining us today for the Q4 Command Center. This is where we're going to be talking about getting your warehouse and your ads firing together, which I think a lot of people don't realize are two very important things that work together the way that they do for the holiday season, but really any time of the year. So joining me today, we have Zeljko from the AO2 team. He's going to be talking about the ad side of thing. And we have Lou from Prep, our partner here, joining today's event. So thank you both for joining. Lou, I'll throw it over to you first for intros, and then we'll hear from Zel.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us as part of this. Excited to talk through it. My name's Lou. How do you do? As Jess said, I lead sales over at Prep. We are an FBA supply chain focused partner, and we really specialize in helping our clients and our partners turn what's usually the biggest headache, right, in terms of selling on Amazon, which is the FBA supply chain, into a competitive advantage. And excited to talk about how you'll be able to do that this year.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thanks again for joining us. Zel?
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. Hi, everyone. My name is Zeljko, and I'm a director of PPC at AO2. Yeah, you probably already know all about us in here, so won't spread the words much more. And yeah, exciting to be here today and excited to share some hopefully interesting topics for you all today.
Wonderful. And for any of you who don't know me, my name is Jessica Wright. I'm CEO at AO2. I run most of these webinar events. We just look to try to bring you some new content every month, introduce you to some of our partners that you could work with to learn a little something more from, and hopefully leave you with some takeaways, things you can actually go do in your business today. So as compared to some webinars that you might attend, we keep it pretty loose and casual. We just want it conversational and to be able to actually bring you content that you can follow along with and go implement. So with that, I think we'll jump right in today. Lou's going to be taking us through first, and I know we've kind of already talked about, I already mentioned Q4 here, and in general, we talk about Q4 a lot. In Q4, we talk about budgets, advertising, like ramping all of that stuff up, and certainly we're going to get into that at the back half of this, but I think what we don't talk about as much is like the fundamental problems that can exist if you don't have your supply chain locked in for having a successful season. Especially for us at the agency, we're always talking about the advertising piece. We generally start talking to our clients about the supply chain piece when a problem comes up.
Yeah, that's
And Lynn
pretty
is talking to
that's
people
pretty
before
common.
that happens.
Well, not always, not always. A lot of times we're talking to people when they're like dealing with a four-alarm fire and they're like, we can't get trucks into Amazon and
Oh,
we have 20 trucks that need to be inbounded and we can't get an appointment, right? So that's usually not forward thinking. But um don't beat yourself up. Like supply chain's not sexy, but it's critical, right? Let's start out just with a little like question for the group. So in the chat, right? Or I guess go ahead and just drop like a yes or a thumbs up if you've never had to deal with Amazon delays in Q4 from an inbound perspective.
should be a pretty quiet response here.
I mean, probably is what we're expecting. I don't come across sellers very often that have had that it said, hey, I had zero issues in Q4. Everything runs like a well-oiled machine, right? And I think like big announcements, big headlines coming up recently, like FBA Prep is sunset in Canada, but it's been sunset here in the United States for, since January already. So brands have already started to do their own prep, and this has caused a lot of pain for sellers. And a lot of times you don't even know, the pain that you're feeling. It's made a lot of sellers, because of the quick switch, had to make quick decisions on prep partners. And weirdly, when I talk to a lot of brands, many of them are not buying their own products on Amazon to audit their current prep partner, which is kind of wild to think about. But one quick change that you can make from a prep perspective, if you're doing kits, if you're doing poly bags, right, is just stop doing poly bags and switch to shrink wrap. So, prep is not generally thought of as like a profit center or revenue generator, right? But just when we talking about, yeah, exactly, crickets. Thank you, Renee. Appreciate that. Um, but when you talk about like ineffective prep that can eat into margins, especially in Q4, poly bags are probably the biggest offender. So I'm going to show you some examples right now. This is one product, right, of a brand that we were working with. Now, this brand in particular, we did an audit of their current FBA prep. We purchased, 20 of their top selling ASINs, looked at their current weights and dimensions, what's listed on Amazon, and we identified that this brand has overpaid about $2 million so far this year just in unnecessary prep fees, and I'll show you why. Right. So this is how the brand was prepping their products. Right. So this is a poly bag, very loose, as you can see, really, a lot of room for error in terms of what the weight and dimension is, and it's not protecting the product. What we actually did at Zon Prep and how we would prep, this is the same product, right? So you can see much larger. This is what the size of the product is. This is what the brand was actually getting charged for, right? So this one improvement in their dimensional numbers actually yielded about $200,000 in savings on this one ASIN alone annually, right? Here's another example. This was the before of another product, and then the after of how we prepped that product, and we saved the brand there about 150,000 annually on that one ASIN. So just prepping and removing of shrink wrapping, and moving to removing of poly bags and moving to shrink wrapping, reverse that, can have a huge impact. But when we get into like some of the more nerdier stuff in terms of like inbound logistics and how that affects your performance, I think is very interesting. But if there's any questions on prep or things like that, happy to turn it off before we turn there into the logistics side of the conversation.
I have a question, and this may be like more in my nerdy wheelhouse, but the immediate thing that I thought about when you showed those examples. So there's part one, which is actually changing the physical size of the product when you get it shipped into Amazon. And then part two is getting Amazon to recognize that the size of the product has changed and
Mhm.
not keep charging you the wrong amount based on the previous weights and dems. So maybe you have an answer for this, maybe not. Maybe this is something we dig into more with our clients and brands who reach out after the fact. But how has that process been for the brands you're working with? Obviously, they're saving money, so it's working, but has that been a hard fought battle to get Amazon to recognize that it's changed?
Well, that one in particular is interesting, right? And that's actually not a core competency of Zon Prep. That's more in the reimbursement side of things. But my previous life, I led GTM at a reimbursement organization, so I'm familiar with that process. And the hard part is you can only select a certain amount of or submit a certain amount of cases in that category per month, right?
Yep.
So you have to be selective around the ASINs that you're choosing. And then the harder part is actually monitoring to make sure that Amazon is maintaining the weights that you're changing, right? So
Right.
I would recommend leveraging a reimbursement partner that gives visibility into those particular changes so you can make those changes on the fly. But you need to, first and foremost, is having the right weights and dimensions so you know what that is, right? And just getting that integrity. But the management of that is a lot more difficult. Shout out to, in particular, Gatita. They do a great job at that case in particular, and specifically with enterprise clients who have to deal with a lot of different SKUs that are changing rapidly. So, that's a real manual process. But again, just be selective on the ASINs that you're submitting cases for. I don't remember the exact number, but there's a certain threshold you can submit without penalty on a regular basis for review. But
Yep.
yeah, good.
Awesome.
Yeah, good question. And I think like the prep side, that's everyone knows about Amazon Prep. It's kind of a core competency. Again, it's being sunset in Canada. We haven't had it in the US for quite some time. So if you haven't audited your prep partner, I would certainly do that. Take a look at how your products are being prepped and kitted and bundled. But really, as we think about, how do we really pull some levers and affect our inbound flow? There's two ways and two ways that you can choose to get product into the FBA network, right? When you're creating an FBA shipment plan in Seller Central, you have the option to either A, pay placement fees, send to one location, have Amazon do that for split your products for you. Most sellers that select that option are doing it out of convenience. It's very convenient to say, hey, don't worry about it, send it all to Amazon, pay the fee, get it across the line and get products in. They don't understand the operational tax that they're effectively paying when you're paying placement fees. So I'll just share my screen here so everyone can see. But the general flow when you're paying placement fees. So product is going to start at from your warehouse, your 3PL, whatever the case is. It's going to go to a national inbound cross-dock center, right? So once it's checked in at that national inbound cross-dock, you're going to see your status as receiving. This is going to vary for brands. Some brands are going to get, and sellers are going to get checked in 1-2 days. Some are going to take 7, 14, 21 days to get checked in, depending on how congested the FBA fulfillment center is, how you're sending in, whether it's LTL, SPD, FTL, a lot of different variables, right? But this is where the process begins, receiving. Now, once it gets here, Amazon's got a bunch of AI algorithms always working in the background saying your products need to get to this final end destination because this is where they're moving the most. So it then gets split to 5 separate regional inbound cross-dock centers. From there, your products get moved again to a localized fulfillment center. It isn't until this point that your products are Prime eligible, right? So they're technically checked in and sellable and received here, but sellable is a gross misrepresentation of the product's ability to sell because they're not Prime eligible until they're at the fulfillment center, right? So this whole process takes, on average, 43 days to complete. Most brands are only thinking about the placement fee. So when they're weighing the option of, well, do I send and pay placement fees or do I send optimized shipments? The way they're making that decision generally is, well, okay, it's less expensive to pay the placement fees and send to Amazon than it is to send 5 shipments to 5 regionals and pay trucking for all those. So I'm going to go with the placement. But that operational tax of 43 days of FC transfer is really, really hurting the brand because that time to Prime eligibility is really what dictates your entire supply chain strategy. That dictates how much inventory you're carrying, how much time of on hand, right? That you're using, that you're holding in storage. And when you think about the fact that like storage fees increase in Q4 pretty substantially. I don't know if you've seen the revenue calculator, right? I'm sure everyone has, but you can check this yourself. We'll just pick a random ASIN here. Right, you come in January to September, storage costs 13 cents. October to December, 39 cents now on that unit per item. It really behooves the brand and is in their benefit to decrease that prime process and really get product in as fast as possible. So if you can optimize your splits, send optimized shipments in as fast as possible, that's what you want to do. Just, question for the group. I'm curious, if you can drop it in the chat, would love to see. How many days of coverage are people typically keeping in FBA storage today? Because most folks we're talking to are, doing 60, 90 to 120 days. What we would like to achieve for our clients at Zon Prep is really as aggressive as possible. We want you to be just above the threshold that prevents a fee for low inventory levels, but keeps you in the green zone, so you're never going to go out of stock, right? And that's what we're really emphasizing is 90 to 180. Thank you, Renee. So that's very typical, right? So I'm not sure, Renee, if you've actually done the analysis there and what that cost means to you, right? When that expands and triples in Q4, but if there's a way to decrease that number from 90 to 180 down to 60, probably that's a demonstrative financial impact for you, right? In that regard. I've been rambling here for a moment, but I think the takeaway cliff notes are like, don't pay placement fees if you can avoid it. Optimize your shipments and send to regionals because you're going to improve your time to prime. Now, there are their own sets of complications that come with doing that, like managing 5 trucks, that sort of thing. That's where Zon Prep does come in, right? We help clients kind of optimize at scale, so to speak.
Yeah, so there's like a value to, I know a lot of brands do try to have like just in time inventory for the season. And especially this year, we might be seeing a lot of brands kind of defaulting in their strategy to that because of the increased fees, because of the new like fuel surcharges and things, and because of the big changes on the advertising side with how brands can pay for their advertising coinciding with Q4 fees. So, right, like you have to bring in a bunch of inventory at the same time as fees are going up, at the same time as you lose the ability to float your ad costs by using a credit card. And this is not for anybody who hasn't heard this yet. This is not applying to all brands, so don't panic. But if you are one of those brands that was impacted, you should have heard by now. And there is that change coming where you're going to have to pay advertising fees by a different means other than credit card. And that is, it's just poor timing. I mean, at least Amazon gave some heads up and brands can plan for it. But the timing when it comes together, I think maybe influencing some brands to try to take a more just-in-time approach and try to trickle things in. Um,
Yeah.
and like, what's your perspective on that? Because you're saying like, let's get it from 90 to 180, maybe down to 60, but also having just in time is probably as big or a bigger problem.
Yeah, I think like just in time, the reasoning for it varies brand to brand, right? It could be more, hey, we're being we're being really cautious and close to the vest about replenishment and or maybe it's a distribution channels situation, right? Or maybe it's, hey, our product just got in the hands of a TikTok influencer and just blew up, and now we need to get a lot of ton of product in. Either way, the point is speed, right? And like getting product into Amazon as quickly as possible is, I would think, the goal for the majority of brands, regardless of the motivation, right? So when you're thinking about like how do I fire my ads and my inventory on all cylinder? Well, number one, you can never effectively advertise an out of stock product. You don't want to push ad spend towards products where you're potentially going out of stock. That's going to tank your organic ranking, all the reasons we know, right? So finding a way to consistently ensure that I'm getting checked in at Amazon and received at Amazon in no longer than 72 hours, I think should be like a heavy checkbox for every brand year round, but especially in Q4, right? And then once you say, okay, we're going to focus on that, like inbound receiving times has to be a priority for us. Then you can reverse engineer, well, how do I accomplish this now, right? What does that look like? Okay, well, I need to send optimized. Great. Well, scheduling right as I need an appointment isn't a super effective way to do that because, with the congestions at FBA, if I need to get inventory in, I'm likely not able to actually deliver for a couple weeks. So how do I mitigate that and get to a point where I can pre-schedule appointments, right? So that's kind of where I think the first you have to have the motivation to say speed is the priority, and then you can work with supply chain experts to tailor make a solution for your brand that works to accomplish the advertising goals you have.
Awesome. Thank you for that breakdown. And for anybody who is interested in more of the advertising things that Lou just mentioned, make sure you stick around. Back half of this will be our presentation on exactly what he mentioned, effectively advertising for things, throughout the season, making the right decisions when things are going out of stock or have gone out of stock and how that impacts you. So, we'll bring it all together, why you should be paying attention to everything that Lou is sharing, because if you want your ads to perform well, you're going to need to keep things in stock and well stocked. So, we'll probably pivot to that here in the next about 10 minutes. So, please stick around. And until then, Lou, what else is important for brands to know in Q4 especially, but year round for this type of thing?
Yeah, I think really like just getting a true understanding of what your actual per pallet rate is also really important. A lot of brands don't, have a good understanding of this. They understand what their different costs are in buckets. So they'll say, okay, I know what my placement fees are, maybe. I know what my shipping costs are, right? But I know what my freight spend is, but they don't necessarily put it all together. So first step is just run a quick quick formula to understand like what is your per pallet rate, and you can do this just by understanding what's your placement fees, what's plus your SPD, LTL, FTL freight cost to get to Amazon, plus any associated prep. So unit item, that stuff. If you have an invoice from your 3PL, then divide that by the pallets you shipped. Now you have your true per pallet rate, and you know like what your cost is, right, to getting into Amazon. Once you get that down, I would say there's really six levers that you can pull on a consistent basis to really improve your inbound efficiency. The first, I'd say, and probably the most overlooked is, kind of on the point of just in time, is consistent replenishment schedules, right? Especially with hero ASINs. The majority of brands are operating in that Pareto 80-20 principle, right? Like 80% of your revenue is coming from 20% of your ASINs. So like for those top movers that have consistent replenishment. The smaller shipments, the smaller SPD shipments, those sorts of things, right, that trickle in causes difficulty in forecasting and planning. If you can get to larger, more infrequent replenishment, so if that's like one truckload per week, right, versus two LTL shipments spread over the week, that's going to help you from an inventory planning perspective, and just overall ensuring that you can gauge what your levels are and your sales velocity on a more consistent basis. The second lever I would look at is, especially if you're leveraging a 3PL, which a lot of brands are using a 3PL to help prep and then ship into Amazon, lock in your rates, right? And lock in those rate lanes to your 3PL for those 90 days, especially during peak. Also, why replenishment and consistent replenishment is necessary, because to lock in those rates, you got to be able to tell the carriers, hey, I'm going to be sending one, two, three, four, five, six trucks a week, whatever the case is, to get the most favorable rate. So lock in those rates to your partners that are ultimately getting product into Amazon. And then the third lever I would say is consolidate, right? So trade those scattered LTL or SPD shipments for floor loaded FTL shipments into Amazon if possible. Now, this one, a lot of brands are going to have a difficult time pulling that lever on their own just because of the volume needed. Like most brands aren't sending enough to send five, full truckloads into Amazon regionals every single week. So if that's not the case, find a partner that can help you with consolidation. That like Zonprep, we're sending 30 plus trucks into Amazon daily, so that way all of our clients can send all of their FBA shipments as a floor loaded FTL. Right. And then I would say timing is also something that you can focus on. So if you're leveraging a partner, a 3PL, make sure that you're having your shipments arrive in an optimal time for them to get into Amazon at the earliest possible date. So, like for example, we'll have clients often send and ship on Friday to us. So that way that freight travels over the weekend, arrives at our facility Monday, and then we can complete the prep project and get shipments out to Amazon by Tuesday. More times than not, our clients are already seeing those inbound shipments at Amazon received by Thursday or Friday of that next week, right? So those are the big ones. And then, of course, optimizing all of your shipments. So I'm happy to share these slides as well. I realized I just wasn't sharing any slides as I was going through all those. But here's kind of just an overview of the 6 areas that we talked about. Obviously splitting your shipments and optimizing, and then this last one, POD documentation. This is really big, right? I think a lot of folks don't have good hygiene here in terms of POD, and they're chasing stuff down, right? Find a way to make sure that you have clean PODs. We, for our clients, actually upload these directly into our portal, so they're able to just pull these PODs, submit them to their reimbursement provider, and get any lost or damaged cases filed really quickly. But I would say those are the biggest levers, right, that you can impact your supply chain in. You're crazy if you think you're not going to be sending into FBA, even if you're using AWD. AWD is already shutting down. Talked to a client earlier today, again, not thinking ahead, like you said, but he jumped on a call with us because he couldn't get another shipment into AWD. They told him for the rest of the year, no. This is a brand that sells toys, kind of critical part of the year for them, right? So need to figure out a way to get into FBA. But that's my spiel. It's not sexy. The ad side will be a lot sexier, I promise. But we do have a cool giveaway that we'd like to provide for folks. I know Jess can drop something in a link in the comments here. But we would love to give you an opportunity analysis of your current supply chain. So just go ahead, fill out this contact us form, drop in the how you heard about us AO2 webinar, and we will run an OA, an opportunity analysis for you. What we're going to look at here is what are your current inbound times at Amazon? How much are you spending in placement fees? How much are you spending in partner carrier program? And then what would that look like with Zon Prep? And if that's compelling enough to run a test truck, we're going to make the barrier to entry super, super easy by offering a $10,000 credit to anyone on this webinar to use against their first qualifying shipment with Zon Prep. So should cover the majority, if not all, of that first shipment that you send. But yeah, we'd love to give you an analysis and talk shipping with you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And yeah, as Lou mentioned, that link is in the chat now, so you can grab that. And I'll share that again towards the end of the webinar and make sure I stay on and give everyone time to grab that if you haven't already. So wrapping up the prep and logistics piece, and now we're going to tie all that together with Zell here, understanding once you get your product to Amazon, how important it is to keep it there and keep it there throughout the season so that you can have a successful season with your advertising as well. So I'm going to launch one poll just to make sure you're all still here with us. So poll should be live now if you'd like to give it an answer. Leave it up for about 30 seconds and see. And the question is, do all Amazon ads pause when inventory runs out? I'm going to let Zeljko answer this, but this is something that changed a couple of years ago, and then there have been nuances and changes since. And I think that there is probably not a lot of awareness, as with most things Amazon. All right, we're about 30 seconds in. I'm going to go ahead and pause it, but we have a completely even split. 50-50 say yes, ads pause, and 50% say no, ads do not all pause. Zell, I know that you probably won't answer that one question outright at the start of things, but you will walk us through everything related to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jess. And yeah, Lou, thank you for the great rundown on the fulfillment side. So basically for the next few minutes, I want to cover the other half of the equation. So what actually happens to your advertising at the moment your inventory position changes? And yeah, do the advertising pauses when you're getting out of stock? Let's find out in a couple of minutes. So just give me a second to share my screen real quick. It is. So basically, right. So here's the thing. Regarding preparations for the stocks, for the ads, for everything on Amazon, you can do everything perfectly, and you can still torch your ad budget this Q4 if nobody connects the two. So basically, let's get into it, how inventory impacts your Q4 advertising strategy, and probably more important, what you can actually do about it before the traffic shows up. So here's the mental model I want you all to live with today. Most of the brands, and honestly most of the agencies too, are running the PPC and inventory planning on two completely separate tracks. Different calendars, different people, different spreadsheets. And the thing is, Amazon doesn't care about your organization chart. The second your stock runs out of the, well, runs thin or runs out of the stock on your ASIN, your advertising, three things are happening at once. And only one of them is actually on the operational side of the problem. First of all, sales are stopping. Velocity on that particular listing drops to zero the moment buy box goes unavailable, no matter how much demand there is still on that product. At the moment, second, probably the bigger factor in a long run is that your rank slides. Amazon's algorithm doesn't know that you're having a supply hiccup and it just reads zero sales. And that's just the thing. Third, spend keeps flowing. So your ads keep buying clicks on listings that literally cannot convert. And I want to flag this now. This is not equally true across every single ad type. So this is like a, well, teaser to the poll Jessica put a minute ago. So we're going to dig into this exactly, which of the ones protect you from the advertising types perspective, which one doesn't, in the following slides and following minutes. But before to get into the mechanics, I want to ground this on something real, so from the real case studies, real situations, not something what was theoretical. This is what we typically find when we're starting working with a brand that has been managing their not only advertising but the full account management in-house. One of the case studies which came recently, I think a couple of months ago, is labeled it as a 6K. That's what one client lost in a single stretch because a temporary replacement SKU never got added to their live campaigns after the original SKU went out of stock. Nobody from their team actually caught it, and unfortunately, after like 7 or 8 days, they figured out, okay, that is what was going on, and they calculated like a big chunk of lost sales only due to that particular matter. Another one, a client had no days of supply system at all before coming into us. So scaling and pausing decisions were just like a gut call, basically, and they were inconsistent from week to week side there. Also, another client who was in the pet accessories category had no standard inventory review operations. Stockouts, unfortunately, only got noticed once the sales dip when the sales dip was already shown in the top line number there. Last thing from the example side here, a client another client of us in the outdoor gear industry category had zero visibility into which ASINs they're even approaching close to a stockout. And unfortunately, in a very similar way, like for the previous example, they found it out only after it actually happens. So the situation in reality is that it is the starting point for a lot of the accounts. And it's exactly why the rest of the talk or the rest of the presentation actually matters. So let's talk about what's actually at stake in a plain terms. So sales velocity is simply your rate of units sold over a rolling window. It's Amazon's live pulse check on demand for your listing. On the other end, or on the second part here, BSR, best-selling rank, is a category ranking that recalculates roughly every hour, and it's driven almost entirely by that trailing velocity number. So it's not like a permanent score, it's a snapshot at that very moment. And yet, it fluctuates pretty much every single hour in there. An organic search rank is where we actually shown up for a given search term, weighted heavily by conversion rates, by also click-through rate in there, and your recent sales history on that exact customer search term. And here's the uncomfortable part. Sorry, Jess?
I was going to say, I've got a poll to launch for this one, and I don't know if you would rather I launch it before or after you get into the uncomfortable part. My question here is for everyone, what are they watching most closely in terms of these three things that we've shared here? BSR coming out in the front to start.
I think most of the people will always talk about BSR first.
That's
And
the the
it's a
thing we hear
fact,
most
yeah.
about. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got about 30 seconds in. I'll give it about 5 more, then we'll close it out. But yeah, the BSR is the only answer. Everyone who has responded has responded with BSR. So that, yeah, that gives an
Yeah.
idea of where people's minds are. Is that right?
Well, pretty much, yes, it is. That is something which affects you the most in the long run. But yeah, the uncomfortable part, all three of these are backward looking, which means that they reward you for what has been already being sold, not what you can sell right now if you actually had any stocks in there. So all three matters. Definitely BSR is probably the sexiest terms everyone on Amazon are using when they're ranking, when they're observing the performance or the position of their products, and how they're calculating success or a drop based on the situation on the stock side. Not only stock side, but in this scenario on the stock side. But yeah, on the other side, here is how that plays out in sequence when the stock out actually happens. 6 steps, and it moves pretty fast. So first of all, you lose the buy box. The second your available units hit 0. Velocity drops to 0 inside the exact same window Amazon is measuring. BSR collapses. We already talked about it. Your organic rank slides right along with it, which means that you're now losing free traffic, so organic traffic, on top of everything else. And trust me, throughout the time, if you're out of stock for a longer period of time, it will be much harder to regain back that organic position or organic rankings for the previously already well converted keywords there. Next thing here, your CPC has to raise, because now you're paying to rebuy the visibility that Velocity and Rank used to hand it for you for free there. And yeah, 6 but not the least, here recovery lacks the stocks. So getting inventory back to the shelves does not automatically reinstate your rank. So every one of these metrics comes back to their own separate timeline, and we're gonna just, well, show it to you in a second what the timeline pretty much in real life looks like there. So the timeline is longer than most of the people expect. I mean, I've heard from many of the prospects who wanted to onboard with us that, yeah, okay, probably I'm gonna re-get back my rank after 2, 3, 4 days. I wasn't out of stock for a long time. It won't affect me that much, etc., etc. But typically, it takes 10 to 14 days for your ACOS and conversion rates to get back to the baseline. And that's assuming that you actually run a structured bid recovery plan and not just flipping everything to how it was before. On the organic side, takes longer, usually 2 to 4 weeks on average, but it depends on various factors. So consider it as a 4 weeks, more closer to that timeline. But still, if you're in a competitive category with like 500 plus competitors and competing ASINs, you're looking more closely to like 4 to 6 weeks. And you're going to be in need for above normal spend the whole way throughout it, just to go back to the even or to the back position where it was before. So 2 steps back, lot more efforts to get to the previous state. And the real documented case we had for one of the prospects, I think like at the beginning of this year, for the previous Q4 site, their BSR went from ranking 180 to 740 in a 5-day stockout. So only 5 days. Pretty much someone will say nothing, but yeah, only in the 5 days period. Their ACOS jumped from like average of around 18 to 20% to like above 60 at the same time window upon they got back on return. So I'm not telling you this to, well, write you up on something, but to stress out the importance of having a healthy stock levels during the most important period of the year, which is Q4 side. We have Prime Day. We still don't have the official information from the Amazon where it will be. Late September, beginning of October. We still don't know. We're waiting for Amazon to enroll it to us. Black Friday, Cyber Monday, the whole Christmas shopping period throughout December itself. So yeah, a lot of time to to actually get maximum out of your sales for this year. And then now I promised we'd come back to which of the ad types actually are protecting your money, your budget here, and which one don't. So as we all know, a couple of main areas of the advertising from the Amazon side are sponsor products, sponsor brands, sponsor display, sponsor brand video, and of course I also want to cover the DSP as in the last, I would say, year and a half, more and more sellers are starting adding DSP on top of their sponsored ad side as a service in order to go outside of the native Amazon ecosystem. In there, go more into the programmatic line and spread the pipe, spread the words outside of the Amazon owned operating websites, inventory, to be able to, in a really programmatic way, find out their perfect customer. But yeah, this is not a topic of a DSP. This is a topic of the ad side. So regarding the ad types, sponsor products are pausing automatically. Same day, same moment, there is a stock out. So there is zero inventory and comes back about a couple of hours after confirming of the restocking on that particular ASIN in there. On the other end, sponsor display, Amazon states that sponsor display is also retail aware too and should stop at the same moment like sponsor products. But in real life, what we are seeing is lag on certain remarketing placements from the sponsor display side. So I would say don't trust it blindly. Double check your sponsor display campaign if you're seeing the stock out on one of your products you're advertising in there, just to be on a safe side, because it can also eat up a lot of your budget if you just don't invest those 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes to double check. Sponsor brands. The multi-product versions are only paused partially. If even one of those free featured ASINs is still in stocks, the ads will keep running, even if it's not your actual bestseller, which is at the moment out of stock in there. For the sponsor brand videos, the situation is a little bit different. It's operating on a single ASIN basis, and more important, unlike the others, they're operating on the ASIN basis. So it does pause only if that particular ASIN goes out of stock, but keeps running if you simply lose the buy box. What does it mean? Say that your FBA offer loses the buy box, again, for any reason, in this scenario for the stock issues. So at that very moment, your FBM can overtake the buy box, or maybe the worst scenario, another seller who's also selling on your ASIN in there. So they can overtake the buy box. So stocks are technically there on your ASIN, but your FBA is not the one who's selling it. And the ad really doesn't know the difference and doesn't care, because someone has the buy box and there is an eligibility to get sold at the end of the day there. So yeah, advice, product out of stock, sponsor brand videos, double check if, first of all, you're having a backup SKU, like for example, FBM. In that case, it's okay. You can run temporarily FBM. But if there's anyone else piggybacking on your ASIN or reseller, would rather just pause it until you're the owner of the buy box back again. And last thing here on the DSP side, there is no built-out inventory check-in on the native DSP platform on the Amazon side. So no one is watching this one for you, and you need to be super detailed and super proactive when you're manipulating the creatives on DSP side if it comes to the stock out at any moment. Okay, but let's zoom in onto the sponsor brand gap, because it's the only that quietly bleeds, I would say, good chunk of a budget. Sponsor brand can feature up to 3 ASINs. Amazon keeps that ad placement alive as long as at least one of those 3 are in stock. What does it mean in practice? It means that the budget will keep flowing into the ad, effectively promoting maybe your weakest in-stock SKU into that headline in there, as it's spending on the CPC side and the creative built out around your strongest product, not the one that actually still is showing, and no one gets an alert there, which means that campaign reads as healthy and active the entire time, even though your bestseller, for example, isn't there and you're advertising you're advertising something you don't want to advertise primarily in there. The fix in there is pretty simple, but it has to be manual, all the rule basis. So swap out of stock ASINs that out of the multi-product creatives the same day, swap it out with something else, or if you don't have ability to do that, just due to the catalog differentiations, just pause the ad temporarily on that end. And then there is a DSP, which is, as mentioned, something nobody's watching from the alert perspective. Sponsored products display are retail aware by design in there, but specifically to check your inventory before they serve. DSP, on the other end, is a programmatic built to reach and remarketing both on and off Amazon, and it just doesn't care about some native stock checks there. That's not the nature of the platform as it is. So, as mentioned before, practical implication, if you're running any of the DSP campaign, treat it as a manual review item, not as a channel that protects itself. And honestly, I've been seeing a lot of the examples for the clients who are running DSP, and that's the most commonly missed leak across all the four ad types, probably because it's the least visible one. And usually on the DSP side, the brands who are eligible for using it are investing a pretty decent amounts of money. Okay, so here is why the stakes are higher, especially for this Q4. So I'm just gonna pretty much go with the story Lou already went in his talk. Storage fees are jumping roughly 3x over from October throughout December compared to the rest of the year in there. And yeah, also AWD is expected to hit the capacity by late Q3 or early Q4. Lou gave the perfect example of one of his clients who already been given a denial in there. So yeah, try to hurry and try to get your AWD stocks, if possible, inbound as soon as possible. And yeah, it tightens your inbound window right when you need it the most. And as mentioned, Q4 is when I would say most of the game on the Amazon is being played throughout the entire year. And also the number one mistake we see, brands which pays their advertising spend to their promotional calendar instead of to the actual stock counts. And yeah, the wrong structure looks like this. Scaling budgets on a Prime Day, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, or any of the other big selling events, regardless of a days of supply. So keeping full bids live until listing actually hits 0 unit, and then panically pausing everything. In there, the moments, well, they're seeing like low stock alerts on the inventory side, Sales Central, or any of the other areas they're observing. On the correct structure side, how it should look. So pace your budget to a days of supply number. Check again, the promo calendar. So against those big selling events. Taper your bids automatically before they hit 0 and not after there. And of course, probably the most important, defend your branded and top converting terms first, because they are the ones which are driving the most of the traffic and the most valuable traffic to you throughout not only Q4 but throughout the entire year. And yeah, on the framework side, this is the actual framework we are using internally within the agency, and I want to walk you through this because it's simple enough to put into practice, well, even today. So at 45 plus days of supply, full throttle, scale your budget, expand match types, test new placements, go crazy in there. You have enough stocks actually to fully support your advertising efforts. But at the moment where you're at the level of around 20 to 45 days of inventory or shelf life for the product, taper. Hold bids flat, stop new keywords expansion, and keep an eye on day parting. 10 to 20 days, defend only branded terms, branded campaigns, plus your top 10, 15, depending on the volume of the account, converting search terms. That is the moment where you want to actually to maximize your winners and at the same time to try not to get out of stock. Under 10 days, pause, redirect. If it happens, sometimes it happens, unfortunately, but if it happens, pause the non-batch campaigns and shift the budget more towards the in-stock SKUs elsewhere in the portfolio there, because usually if something's out of stock and you still want to keep the momentum on and your top level numbers, It's not the end of the day. It happens, but yeah, be smart and just divert it to something which you can actually sell throughout the period until the restock actually happens. And yeah, let's now try to put that framework on the calendar, because timing, I would say, matters just as much as those thresholds themselves. Early October, Prime Day, or late September, we'll still see, but around late Q3, beginning of Q4, confirm days of supply on every promoted ASINs before you submit the deal, and not after you already committed to some deal in there. Late November.
Just real quick on the
Yes.
fall Prime days, we feel pretty confident. Amazon still has not given those specific dates, but they did say same time as last year. So we are all interpreting that as that first week of October. If anybody hears any different, please tell us as soon as you hear.
Please let us know.
Yeah, we did heavily think it was going to push back into September, just based on how other events have shifted this year. And all of the signals are telling us that is not happening. We are not going to have a massive event in Q3. We're just going to see 2 events in Q4, and Q3 gets missed this year with the shift to Prime Day. So we are focusing on that early October. I think you're right, the way you put it in the slides.
Yep. Most likely early October, but still, if it happens that it'll be like for any reason last week of September or so, it's pretty close to the weeks themselves. So I would rather plan the inventory for the late September than for the early October, just for being on a safe side in there. And yeah, don't worry if inventory stays a little bit longer on the FBA side, it won't make a big difference in there. It will get sold, which is the most important for everyone in Q4. But yeah, late November, we have Black Friday, Cyber Monday, so peak storage and fuel surcharges are already live by that point. So recheck supply on your hero SKUs, I would say weekly, throughout that entire window period. And also mid-December, your inbound cutoff. This is your pretty much last chance to top up in there, and after like mid-December, or I would rather say around 10th of December, you're managing what you already have on the shelves, not what you wished you had. So what has been enrolled into the inventory by, I would say, around 10th, maybe even 15th of December, but more closely to like first 10th of December, it will be your game for the rest of the Q4, or for the rest of the days in December itself. So practically, what do you actually do with all this starting this week? What you can do? 6 moves. Full days of supply for every ASIN you're currently having and which is carrying the advertising spend. Also, beside that, set the 4-tier rule we just went through. There, audit all 4 ad types, especially sponsored brands, sponsor brand videos, and if you're using a DSP, protect your hero SKU first. Make sure that your hero SKU, your highlighter, your all-star is well protected with inventory, and also with the support from the advertising side as well. And well, 5, resume gradually after restock. So snapping straight back to your old bids, just revise rank you already had at the, I would say, inflated CPC value. 6th, and well, the last from now here, make stock campaign input, not a footnote on a monthly report you'll be looking. So not only write it down, make connections, because yeah, all of us are used to read various shiny reports with a lot of information in there, and sometimes it can go below the radar, honestly. So it is very important that if you're the one who's writing the report or doing the analysis, presenting it to your shareholder, your CEO, your agents, whoever, in there you highlight specifically that area. Or if you are the one who's receiving those reports from the agency or someone else on your team, be sure to actually ask them to do the analysis on those terms. And I think this actually concludes the topic of the advertising side we have. So we'll be more than happy to actually get any questions you might have, and wanna, well, in advance, thank you for staying for this long on the call. And at this very moment, want to give the mic back to Jess for a second.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So much good information. And I know that's a lot to digest. But thank you, Zal and Lou, both of you, for everything you presented. This might be the first time in probably about 3 months that we are close to wrapping up on time. So I want to respect everyone's time and actually be able to do that today. So if you've submitted a question and we haven't been able to answer it live, we have your information. We will follow up with you directly. I want to make sure I give both of our panelists a chance here to share one parting thought, and then also want to make sure that we reiterate what's available in the chat and those links and give everybody a chance to grab those. So I love to close these out with that, final thought, final tip, takeaway. I thought it was funny that you both brought six tips.
That was not planned. Yeah.
No, there was
not at all. Not at
no
all.
coordination of decks whatsoever, but somehow you both aligned on six, which is so funny to me. I'll share one tip for Q4. Some of you may have heard me say this before, but as someone who got my start in e-commerce in the toy industry, I think this tip is so relevant to this, and it's not even a tip. It's just something you must do. But whoever has stock in that final week before the holidays is the one who is like winning the season. There is no goal to sell out of everything immediately. I know that you want to move through your stock and you want to, right size your fees and your inventory, but just remember that selling out early at too small of a profit doesn't make you any more money than managing it well and keeping it in and selling at a higher profit when others have sold out. So do the right thing for your brand, but I really think there is power behind keeping that stuff in stock, changing your discounts throughout the season, and being the one who has product that can be picked up from an Amazon warehouse by one of those local drivers and taken to someone's house on Christmas Eve. You're still going to get sales and you can get them at a higher margin. So, think about that as you're thinking about how to, once you get that stuff to Amazon, once you're selling through it, thinking about how to actually manage your margins. That is my one tip for this about managing inventory throughout the season. Lou, do you have one last thought to leave us with?
Yeah, sure. I guess, it would be, I would just challenge folks to really think, how can you leverage your FBA supply chain as a competitive advantage versus a cost center, and grievance center, right? So thinking strategically about your inbounds, your speed, prioritizing speed. Speed is king in every scenario. And then, if you're doing prep today, really consider, like, is that something we should be doing? Are we hurting our speed, and are we hurting our brand's ability to capitalize on getting in fast by us doing this? And do we want to be in the prep business, or the e-commerce business at the end of the day, right? But I think if you can think that way, you're thinking like those large 9, 8, 9, 10 figure brands on Amazon and how they operate, and I think that's the big difference.
All righty. And Zell, anything from you? It can be doubling down on something or something new you haven't mentioned yet.
I don't think so. Actually, I think we covered pretty much everything from the presentation, from the deck. Just want to pretty much remind everyone about what they already know. And so even though it's like mid-August right now, Q4 is literally in front of our doorsteps. And the game will be played no matter are you participating or not. So be wise, do the preps, follow the advices from both Lou and myself, hopefully. And yeah, try to take as big chunk of the cookie as possible. Want to wish everyone a happy Q4.
Love that. Cookie monsters over here.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I think last month there was a reference to pies in the oven, and now we're talking about cookies, and
Hey.
it's a recurring theme. All right. Thank you everyone so much. Thanks to both of our panelists for joining. Thanks to all of you who watched us today, and to every single one of you stuck around for the entire presentation. So really appreciate that as well. Our panelists will drop off now. I'll go off camera, but I'll hang out a minute in case anybody wants to grab that link that Lou shared earlier. I'm also going to drop a link to our next webinar. You can go ahead and get registered for that. So you can join us next month as well. But thank you to everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thank you.